Okay, this is Jean Krause, and I am interviewing Lucille Mieher in her kitchen in Fremont, California, and today is October the 3rd. So, Lucille, why don't you tell me the name you were born with?
One I was born with?
Lucille.
Eva. Eva Lucille Edwards.
And when were you born?
On a Sunday morning, September the 27th, 1931.
Oh, so you just had your birthday. And how old are you now?
76.
And where were you born?
Paducah, Kentucky.
Oh. And your parents' names?
The ones they were born with?
Yeah. I hope those were the only parents you had.
Oh, no, but they were born with different names than they got later.
Okay, well, go ahead and tell me about your father. When was he born?
Okay, his name was Norvis Brian Edwards. And he was born, he always claimed, December the 29th, 1898. But I'm not too sure about that.
Why?
Different things have come up to make me believe he might have been born December the 29th, 1899. I think he was maybe a year younger than he always claimed.
And do you think he was doing this on purpose, or that it was just that he was wrong?
I kind of figured two different things. I think once he met my mother when they were in high school and realized that she was a year older than he was. This is the way I figure. He just decided he was going to say he was born in 1898, so it would make him a year older and he'd be the same age as she was.
So is that the only reason why you think that, or is there something else?
I think he ran off to join the Navy and he was probably still underage, so that came in handy for him so he could get in the Navy.
Oh, okay. And so, so you said the names they were born with. So did he end up with a different name later?
Yes, somewhere along the line he got the nickname of Nick, and he was Nick Edwards till the day he died.
Okay, and what's the story about how he got the nickname Nick?
Well, that I'm not sure of. I think it was some buddy of his who one day just out of the blue called him Nicodemus and dropped the Demus off of it, and he became Nick. And it stuck. He liked it, I guess, and his friends, oh, I'm sure all of them liked it better than Norvis. So he was Nick Edwards.
And so your mom, when was she born, and what was the name she was born with?
Well, I'm sure about hers. I don't think there was any doubt about hers. Her name was Lenny Kathleen Osborne, Osborne. And I think she was born with it spelled Linnie, but somewhere along the line she began spelling it Lennye, and that I think it just looked prettier. So she was born December the 24th. She was born on Christmas Eve of 1898.
Ah, okay. So by changing his birth year by a year, he would have made himself only 5 days younger.
Only 5 days younger,
Okay.
and he could live with that. But I have a feeling he just couldn't buy being a full year younger. That would be too much.
So now, was her name still Lenny? I mean, for instance, did your dad call her Lenny the whole time, or did she ever have a nickname too?
I didn't think she ever had a nickname. I thought she was always called Lenny. But I found in these letters that he a lot of times called her Lenner, Lenner, Lenner. I don't know. That usually was a sign he was feeling good about her to call her Lenner.
And so he never called her that you ever remember when you were
Never.
growing up?
I never heard that. I didn't know it till I read these letters.
Okay, so now, where was your dad born? If you know.
Yeah, Daddy was born in just a little wide place in the road in Kentucky called Guthie. Guffie, I think was the spelling of this little town. Guthie, Kentucky. And just over a few hills from there, Mother was born in Wyman, Kentucky. Wyman.
So now, where in Kentucky is this? East or west?
Oh, Western Kentucky. In McLean County. McLean, McLean County.
So what's the nearest big town? If there was one then.
There's Calhoun. Calhoun was the county seat of McLean County, and that was the nearest town, and that's where they both went to high school and where Daddy lived from when he was a little boy. So.
And what was the name of the town again?
Calhoun.
Calhoun.
It's spelled Calhoun, like I think there was a general or something in the Civil War named Calhoun. But I have found in reading up on some books about Calhoun that it originally was spelled Calhoun, Calhoun like that. But now it's Calhoun, and it's on the Green River, which is a narrow river, but really, really deep. They used to, right there at Calhoun where the river went by, they used to say it was bottomless. They said nobody had ever been to the bottom of the river. And big ships, if they had brought them in, could have gone down. Green River is deep. It was that deep. I wouldn't swim in it.
So now, but you were born in Paducah.
Yeah.
So, when did your parents get married?
November the 18th, 1924.
So you know this stuff about your parents. I don't know this stuff about mine. I got to get back and go their birth dates, their years. I don't even know where they were born, and I don't know when they got married. So you're more up on these things about your family. So when did they move to Paducah?
They moved to Paducah, I assume, right before I was born, and then they moved away, and then we moved back to Paducah again for a couple of years later.
When they moved away, where did they go?
Cadiz, Kentucky.
How do you spell that?
Cadic. There's also a city in Spain. Maybe.
Oh, Cadiz.
Yeah, they got. Oh, yes,
Oh,
it's
okay.
pronounced different there.
Oh, okay.
In Western Kentucky, it's Cadiz. Cadiz is spelled the same, but it's not Cadiz like in Spain.
So why did they move there?
Oh,
If
Daddy's
you know.
business. He was working for the state highway department and building highways, and so that's he moved wherever the state moved him at that time.
Okay, and so they lived in Cadiz for a
Mhm.
while, and then back to Paducah.
Mm-hmm.
And now you have a sister, correct?
Yes.
And is she older than you or younger than you?
She's older by about 4.5 years.
Okay. And so was she also born in Paducah, or was she born somewhere else?
No, I think she might have been born in Bowling Green, Kentucky, but there's a possibility she might have been born in Russellville, Kentucky, which is close to Bowling Green. I'm not real certain where she was born.
And what's her name? Full name?
Patsy Ruth. Patsy Ruth Edwards, naturally.
And her birth date?
May the 3rd. Trying to think what year. 4.5 years difference.
Well, you were 31. right?
Yeah, you're going to have to back up. So
That's
that'd be 1927.
27.
And since she's born in May, May the 3rd, that would give her that half a year before you get to September. So I'd say it was 1927.
Okay. And, so I'm sorry, you said your parents got married in 24?
Yes.
And how old were they if you... Yeah. Well, no, you said they were born in 98. Okay.
Yeah, but
So they would have been 25 or 26.
yeah, it's easy to remember since their birthdays are so close to New Year's that each year, through most of the year, they are going to be a year older than what the year is, if you get what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always pretty easy to remember that they would be, like say in 1931, they would have both been 32 years old for most of the year, and then anyway, that's...
So, you said they met in high school. Let's see. Oh, I see you've got some letters here. You have written 1916, 11th grade in high school for both. So obviously they knew each other before then. Why was your dad writing a letter to your mom at this point, if you know?
Yeah, because she, by then, I guess it was even in grade school that my daddy's family had moved to Calhoun. My granddaddy was owned a store. He had been a huckster. He had a huckster wagon.
What's that?
He would travel around the countryside out there selling groceries. He had a little grocery store in Guffey, the little town where Daddy was born. And besides selling groceries at that store, then he would drive around in what they call a huckster wagon and sell groceries to farmers. And
So is that where they got the word that somebody who sells things is a huckster?
yeah, I guess so, because I know that's what they called that wagon that had the stuff on it. And I think even later on when I was a child, and even maybe today, the Jewel Tea truck would come around and the man would come in the house and sell Jewel Tea products. And I thought that probably began as a huckster way back then.
Now, did these wagons, did they have things built on them? I mean, was it just an open wagon like what you would think of today? Or did it have stuff on it that could hold all the different things? I mean, I assume you saw these wagons.
Oh,
Did you ever see one?
no, I've only seen pictures of them.
Oh,
Well,
uh-huh.
I have one picture of one that looks like the one they say my granddaddy had. And I think it had sides that you could lift up. And maybe even have things hanging off the sides. I'm trying to think. I've seen movies taken at that time where they would have someone would be driving around the country with a wagon that would have all of these things, and they'd lift up the side and you could see all of the things that they were selling inside the wagon, and then they could drop the side down to protect them from the weather.
So this is what your grandfather did.
Yeah, and that's what he did. He had this little grocery store, but people couldn't always come to the groceries, so he could take the huckster wagon out and sell his wares that way. But anyway, so
They moved to Calhoun.
they moved into Calhoun, the little town of Calhoun, and he built a nice grocery store, a bona fide grocery store on the main street in Calhoun. And they lived in Calhoun, and there was a grade school in Calhoun, and the high school in Calhoun was a converted big two-story house. And so children that lived out on farms like my mother did, and they would go to little one-room schoolhouses out in the country. But when it was time to go to high school, the only way they could do that would be to go into Calhoun. And as far out as my mother lived, when she wanted to go to high school, she rented a room, or I imagine her parents rented a room for her in Calhoun, and so she would go in and live in town through the week to attend high school, and then on weekends she'd go back home out in the country.
So I assume this room that they rented was with a family that they trusted to
I
take
guess.
care of her.
I guess I don't know much about where she stayed in town in order to go to high school, but I knew that was the only way that she could go to high school, and she was determined to go because she fully planned to go to college.
That was one of the things I wanted to ask that was coming to my mind while you were talking was, so they didn't, this was before the days of compulsory education, I take it.
Oh,
Since
yeah.
she was wanting to go to high school. Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
oh yeah. Oh yeah, out there in the country, most of the people, especially the boys, would just finish probably 6th grade if they were doing well, and then go to work on their daddy's farm and that kind of thing.
So she was coming into town and living in this room their parents rented for her to go to high school. And so at this point, your dad was also going to high school.
Yeah, because he lived in town, so that was no problem for him to go to high school.
And so obviously he wanted to go to high school too, because there still was no compulsory education. So
Yeah, oh yes.
And so they met in high school in Calhoun, Kentucky. So, so tell me, how did you? So I see we've got letters from 1916, 18.
Here's
Oh, there's
17.
17.
Yeah,
16, 17, 18, 19, 1920, 1921, 1922.
Nope. Well,
Yeah, well, it looks like 22.
no, yeah, but that's the note I have there. What happened to 1922?
Oh, I see. So these are 23.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when I see 24.
24, and then they were led all the way up to their time of their marriage.
And then they stopped after that? Or did he ever write letters again
I
after
got
they
a little packet of letters for covering about 1 month, several months after they married.
Okay. And how did you know anything about these letters as you were growing up?
Absolutely no. I never imagined that I'd find this, mainly from one statement my mother made to me.
Uh-huh.
The year I was going off to college, Mother said, "Don't hold your breath waiting to hear from your father. He never wrote a letter in his life." And so he was a quiet man, and so that didn't surprise me. I thought, okay, so Daddy doesn't write letters. So when I went off to college, I got letters from Mother, but she was true to her word that he never did write to me.
When did you go to college?
In 1949.
Okay. All right. So anyway, sorry I interrupted.
No,
Okay, so
this
you never
is your interview.
So, yeah, but you're doing good. So your mom said don't expect any letters from your dad, and sure enough, you never got any. And then how did you find these?
We were in 1985. My sister and I were clearing out their house. By that time, they were both in a nursing home together in Lexington, where my sister was living, and so we were going to have to sell their house. So she and I went into their house in Madisonville to clear it out, and I was cleaning out the drawers in my mother's desk, and it was crammed full with all of these letters, mostly from Daddy, but there's one stack that were from her to him. But anyway, I thought, my goodness, he did write letters. He wrote them an abundance of letters, and I felt like I had hit gold. So I packed them all into a box and addressed them to myself and mailed them to me out here in California.
Well, that was very fortuitous. pack them up and mail them to yourself. Now you were saying that he worked for the road, the highway department or whatever it was in Kentucky. Now I thought that I remember Niall saying that one of the things that helped pay for his college was something to do with money or an investment or a patent or something that he had.
Oh yeah, he didn't stay with the state.
Okay.
He started out working for the state right out of college, but in 1937, that was what they called the year of the big flood. We were living in Paducah, and right on where the Ohio, let's see, I guess the Ohio and Mississippi, and maybe there's some
Confluence.
Yes, of rivers there at Paducah. And in February of 1937, there was a big flood. And we were living in an apartment in a high-rise, in a building that was about 4 stories high. And we felt pretty safe, but it was getting higher and higher. And I remember one day we had a DeSoto, a new DeSoto called the Airflow. It was a Chrysler product, Chrysler DeSoto anyway, and he said he thought we could drive out through the water. And that was one of the scariest things, because the water was actually up to the running board, and we drove out of town in that flood, in that water that high, and we drove to Mayfield, Kentucky, where my mother and daddy had a good friend, this man and his wife, who were running a funeral home in Mayfield, Kentucky, and we stayed with them until the water went down enough that we could drive to Madisonville, Kentucky. And my daddy had heard about a construction company there, and run by this Mr. Coram. And he met Mr. Coram, and they formed a partnership. And so from then on, he owned his own business, and he from then on, the only work he did for the state was contract work. He had his own business, and then he would contract with the state to build highways and things, but he also built people's private roads and driveways and things too.
So then he was always someone who built roads?
Yes.
Okay, and so when he went to college, where did he go to college?
His first year he went to Bowling Green, which is where my mother also went, but they didn't go at the same time. Right now I'm not really sure how it was that he went to Bowling Green before she did, but he didn't go more than 1 year at Bowling Green, because it was what they called a normal school. It was mainly a teacher's college, and so when I guess he finished 1 year there, then he transferred to the University of Kentucky.
Which is located where?
In Lexington,
Okay.
Kentucky. And
Studied?
he studied, but just for a while. He went for a year or two, and then I think that's about the time that he joined the Navy, and was in the Navy for quite a while. And then when he came back from the Navy, he went back to the University of Kentucky. So the Navy kind of, his stint with the Navy kind of interfered with his schooling, but then he went back to the university when he got out of the Navy.
And what did he get his degree in?
That's the thing. I had thought all these years, I mean, not all these years, but I had thought up until, it may have been after he died. that I said something to my sister about his degree in engineering, and my sister said, he never did get his degree. And I hadn't realized that, and I had wondered about that, and in these letters, it became pretty clear that in these letters there's almost a 2-year period that I don't have any letters from him or to him. And I had always heard that there had been a time when he kind of disappeared for a while and had caught freight trains and things to Texas and worked in the oil fields of Texas for a while. And I think that when he was in his last year, which would have been his last year in college, he had such a heavy course. In one of these letters, it listed all of the subjects he was taking, and I think it was just more than he could handle, and he suddenly realized that he didn't really know if he wanted to be an engineer. He wasn't sure what he wanted to do, so he chucked it all and caught a freight train and I maybe thumbed some rides, but he got to Texas and worked in the oil fields for a couple of years. Then he went back to, evidently he didn't even go back to school. He must have gone back to Kentucky and immediately got a job working with a road crew somewhere, started at the bottom and worked with a crew that was building highways for the state of Kentucky, and from then on that's all he did. And he always built blacktop highways. He didn't build the concrete highways. He built asphalt. He was 100% for asphalt.
So what was it that he did that allowed for this money that was able to pay for college for Niles? And then maybe.
Well, he was successful in his business with Mr. Coram. They formed the partnership and called Coram and Edwards, and then later they incorporated and it became Coram and Edwards Inc. And so since they were a corporation, they had shares of stock which they sold, and as they prospered in later years, he bought stock for all of us, Pat and myself and the boys. So we had shares of stock, and then I don't remember the timeline exactly, but he sold off a lot of his stock and their stock too. So there was money that was available. Okay.
So now, when he was in the Navy that interrupted college at University of Kentucky, what was your mom doing in the meantime?
And she was very much going to Bowling Green to study to be a teacher. And in those days, a lot of especially the little one-room schools out in the country that I mentioned that she went to as a child, you only had to have so many credits to be able to teach in those. And so she would go to college for a semester maybe or two, and then she would get her a job teaching out in the country. And a lot of the time she taught in the very little school that she had been taught in herself, and then she would earn enough that she could afford to go back to school and take some more, and she just worked her way through college that way, teaching for a while and then going to school for a while. So she was in college when Nick was in the Navy.
So did you always call your dad Nick, or did you call him Dad? Or Daddy?
I called him Dad or Daddy until I don't know when I started. I think I still called him Daddy all the time, but in talking to other people, I would call him Nick. I worked for him off and on for several years, and I never ever called him Daddy in the office. I actually called him Mr. Edwards, and which seemed kind of strange, but I mean, that was professional. If there weren't any other people in the office, he was Daddy again. But I think probably those last few years, I still called him Daddy. But now that he's gone, whenever I refer to him, it's just natural to call him Nick.
So, so when your mom finished going to college, or normal school, was it still called normal school the whole time she was going, or did it change its name?
No,
during
it
the time she was
changed
there?
even while she was there. It changed its name several times there in Bowling Green. I think by the time she finished there, it was called Western Kentucky Teachers College. But I'm not even sure what it's called today. I think it's changed its name again. But
So when you and your sister were born and growing up, was your mom still working was she working as a teacher?
no. She was working as a teacher in Louisville when Mother and Daddy married, and the only thing I can figure is that in order to marry Daddy and them have a short honeymoon, she must have quit teaching in Louisville, and I don't know when she went back to teaching again, because of course there was 2 or 3 years there before my sister was born, and then I was. But I know for sure once my sister was born, Mother didn't teach again. She was full-time mother and housewife until I guess until I was in high school, and we lived right across the street from a grade school, and the principal there knew that Mother was a teacher, and she asked her to start substituting, and Mother did, and then she asked her to go back teaching full-time, and Mother said, well, she needed to brush up on some of her courses, so she went back to Bowling Green in the summertime, and got whatever certificate she felt she needed, and began working, teaching full-time.
Now, you said you guys lived across the street from a grade school, so what town was this?
Madisonville, the one we went to. They used to say the 1937 flood washed us to Madisonville and never did wash us back out.
So you guys had lived in Paducah, and then the flood came in 37, and you guys moved to Madisonville
Yes.
at that point?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I was wondering, when you said your dad had gotten in the car and said we could drive through the water, was this to escape the water, or was it just because he wanted to see if he could drive through the water?
Knowing Nick, he never let anybody tell him he could not do something, even in that flood. We're lucky to be alive today because he took chances. There was one place, there were a lot of people trying to drive out of Paducah if they could. But some of them weren't as lucky as we were to have a DeSoto, I think. But we came to one area where we were on a high rise, and there was a high rise across from us, but there was a dip in between where the water was rushing across there so hard and so fast that they had big, some kind of big equipment out there, big heavy-duty equipment, and they were one by one pulling cars across that low area because they said a car going across there would just be washed right out into the main part of the river and swept away. They said it was too dangerous, and so you would have to wait for this big, I don't know what piece of equipment it was, to pull a car over to the other side and then come back to get another car and pull it. They had a big chain or something, I guess, to attach it to it. Well, Daddy wasn't about to wait because we were way back in line. And he said, it'll be forever before they pull us across. He said, we can drive across there and we won't get swept away. And so we started driving across that thing, and the water was rushing hard. And you could not see the edge of the road because it was all underwater. And you just couldn't tell where you were. And I mean, I can remember I was scared. And water began seeping in. It was above the running board by then, and it was rushing fast, and water was seeping in through the door. And I began to cry. I can remember crying. And my sister got mad at me. She wasn't about to cry. And she just slapped me real hard. She was a slapper. And she slapped me and said, shut up and quit your blubbering. And so then Mother reached over in the back seat and slapped Pat. And poor Daddy, he's trying to keep the car under control and get us across that place. And the authorities were mad as could be because he went around everybody and just drove right on through it. And but we made it. We got through it, and we survived and went to their friends in Mayfield. But I think that was probably one of the most scared I ever was in my life.
Was your dad working when you guys were in Paducah when this flood came in?
Yeah, he was still with the state.
Okay.
But evidently, he had already made contact with this Mr. Coram.
Okay.
And knew that he was looking for a partner. And so he thought, this is a good time for us to get out of here. And we left in such a hurry that all of our belongings and everything were in that apartment, in that fourth floor, in the Charleston Apartments. That was the name of them. They were right across the street from the Ritz Hotel. And I found out since then that the Ritz was a big chain of hotels. But anyway, and so there were a lot of refugees down at ground level who lived down in houses and things that were being totally taken over by the flood. And so they opened up those upstairs apartments and let people just live in them. And Mother used to be so angry because our things were used by total strangers, and because she had a teapot, a beautiful pewter, I think it was pewter teapot that she really treasured, and somebody somehow burnt a hole in it. I don't know how. It was a fine little hole. And so when after everything settled down, and we lived in a tourist home in Madisonville for a long time till the flood waters went down.
What's a tourist home?
Oh my, you don't know what a tourist home
Never
is?
heard of a tourist home.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, a tourist home would be, I guess now they call them a bed and breakfast. They sell. A big difference, big difference. It would be somebody who had, per se, a pretty good sized house. And in those days, usually they were for tourists who were going somewhere for a visit maybe, and on their way they would stop and stay in a tourist home. So the people would rent out a room or two, whatever you needed, and usually there was a shared bath. Maybe there would be one bathroom on each floor if it was a pretty good sized house. And we stayed at the Ross. Mr. and Mrs. Ross had this Ross tourist home, and we lived there for.
Now, is this Madisonville or is this Mayfair?
This was in Madisonville. In Mayfield, we just lived at the funeral home with the couple that were friends of Mother and Daddy's, Mr. and Mrs. Fuqua was their name.
What do you mean you lived at the funeral home?
Well, they had this nice house that part of it was the funeral home, but they lived in the rest of it.
So they let you guys stay in the funeral home part?
Yeah, no, we lived in the part was their their living quarters, but we were in their funeral home. They later built a beautiful big funeral home in in Hopkinsville, but that's not part of this story.
I have a feeling you got lots of stories.
Oh, I'm full of them. Or maybe I'm full of it. I don't know.
So, Madisonville then is where you guys ended up? That's where you got the job? I mean, that's where he joined partners with...
Mr. Coram.
Okay. And going back to something you said earlier, when your dad... You said that there was a gap of two years in this letters, and you're wondering if that was the time that your dad took off and went to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
What was your mom doing in that time while he was gone?
She was in school, evidently wondering where he was for 2 years, and it's pretty clear in the letters. What the first one I read that she had written, I think I can tell that she was pretty perturbed about where this man that she was so much in love with and who had been writing her almost daily, sometimes twice a day, suddenly quit writing, and she had no idea where he was for 2 years.
So then he comes back because the letters pick up again.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, where was he and where was she? That he would be mailing these
The first
letters?
time she heard of him, according to what I've been able to decipher from these letters, because the last she heard, he was at University of Kentucky with this heavy load to carry, and then the next thing she heard was a letter from this little town in central Kentucky named Cox's Creek, C-O-X, I guess it's C-O-X apostrophe S. On the map it said C-O-X-S. Anyway, Cox's Creek. And he was writing her from what he called camp. And this is an area when they were building a highway and all the men had to be out on the job. They would set up a camp, and they would have, hopefully, a building or two, kind of almost like a log cabin, to have the office and for the engineers. And then everybody else pretty much lived in tents. And they would live out there all through the week and work on the construction, and then hopefully if they lived close enough they could go home on the weekends. And so he was writing her from camp outside of Cox's Creek, Kentucky, and it's just a letter telling her that he's out there working on a road crew, and it doesn't say anything about that he has been to Texas and in the oil fields, but in one of the letters it comes up that, like, maybe Mother says something like, that must have been when you were in the oil fields in Texas. So that's the only thing I can decipher.
Okay. So he was off on a job, and she was living, well, we can
And
see from the address that he wrote to her where she was living.
Yeah. She was at Bowling Green at school. And it's amazing. In those days, well, most of them, the 2 cents, would take the letters. And sometimes they got delivery twice a day. And the letters would be delivered hundreds of miles across the state. And yet... They'd receive the letter the very next day.
You wonder why we can't do that today.
Yeah, what were they doing? And this is out in the country. Like, you ask, how come he was writing to her when they were in high school? Well, like I said, she lived out in the country, and so on weekends sometimes, then maybe she wasn't in town. Well, he would be writing to her out in the country, so that because they couldn't always drive out there, it was several miles.
Oh, and look, the envelope only has her name and the town of Calhoun, Kentucky, and that's it.
And there's
although this is RFD
number
number 3,
but there's some of them could be sent to Calhoun, Kentucky, or sometimes if you wrote to somebody in the same town you were living in those days, it was even my time when I was younger. You could address it to them and just say city, and that meant it's to go to the same city.
Well, oh, okay, because if you look at these letters, I mean, look at this. Here's the name, her name, Lenny Osborne, Calhoun, Kentucky. But the RFD number 3 looks like to me, it looks like it's written in a different handwriting. I wonder if that was the post office. I mean,
It could be.
Does that look to you like it's in a different handwriting?
It could easily be, yeah.
Because this looks almost like it's a pencil.
Well, I think they are.
I
I think even, well, now they are. That's one thing. All of their writing was done with fountain pens because they didn't have ballpoint pens then. And once in a while it'll begin to kind of be fading out and say, well, it looks like my fountain is running out of ink. And so the fountain pen was running out of ink. But it was amazing that it always got to them. There's never any time that they mention anything about, I wrote you a letter, but evidently you never did receive it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my! But there weren't as many people around then.
So, let's see. I was thinking there was something else I wanted to ask before I stop for now. So we talked about the years. We've talked about the gap that was in the letters and where your dad could have been. Then all of a sudden they start again, and they continued up until shortly after they got married. And
yeah, actually, there is a gap in there during when they actually married, because the last of these letters end off with they're still not talking. They're not really talking to each other about the fact that they're going to be getting married, but I kind of just figured they are. And then that last little packet of letters is after they've already been married for several months.
now, it says here on this note that you have here that when he ran off to the Navy that he had gone with his cousin Harvey. So does he mention that in these letters, or is this just something you just know?
It's something I know, and I did find a picture. I don't know, somewhere.
Well, you say here he literally ran off to join the Navy. Was that just because you were figuring that he was too young and he really wanted to join the Navy to go fight in the war, or what?
I think so. I think he just well, we'd been in World War I for a couple of years then, and it was the patriotic thing to join the Navy, and it was a big thing in those days, join the Navy and see the world.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to see the world, and he always did what he wanted to. I mean, and my mother told me, talking about my daddy's mother, he said she spoiled her sons. She said she pretty much let them do whatever they wanted to, and so she probably wasn't surprised when he joined the Navy and took off.
So you were telling me earlier that when he joined the Navy, that actually he never actually saw any battle because the war ended by the time he got anywhere. But you were saying that the Navy interrupted his school. So did he stay in the Navy even though the war was over? Did he stay in the Navy for a while after that, or do you know?
Yeah, he stayed. He was in there longer than I realized, because I knew that he had been assigned to the USS Northern Pacific, and Northern Pacific, yeah. And
what is this?
This is the log book, and I didn't realize. I knew that I had this book that had the title on it, the USS Northern Pacific. I thought it was just kind of like a history book telling about that ship.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, it is the log book.
For the ship?
For the ship, and it tells all of the, whatever you call the cruises, actually, they call it, when they're going to go out in the ocean and come back. But
any idea how your dad got this?
It covers the year he was on the ship, and maybe they printed these up for.
Is it printed or is it handwritten?
Oh, it's beautiful,
I see.
Beautiful, wonderful pictures and everything of the captain and the ship, and I even found one group picture with Daddy in it, hiding behind some people, but he's in there. But anyway.
So I see. So this looks like it was actually a published thing. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But it was for the year he was, I guess he was only in there for,
I
a year.
I wonder if they gave one to everybody that was on the boat, or what?
I don't know. But anyway, it made, I don't know how many voyages to France. But he had been assigned to this ship when the armistice was signed. And so he was not going to get to see any fighting. But he still was going to get to be on the ship and go somewhere. And I thought that he maybe just went to Paris once, that they went to Paris, came back to the U.S., and he got off the ship and was no longer in the Navy. But this thing lists all the times that they went, and he went to Brest, France. That was a big port where they would land. And Paris, he went to Paris several times, and they would, get shore leave for a while, and he'd get to actually see where they were docked at that time, or whatever you call it. But there were, anyway, he made a bunch of trips back and forth between France and the U.S.
Is this where your dad's in the picture?
Yeah.
I was going to say you had a note mark there.
He's hiding. He's right back there. You can see everybody else is in plain view.
Well, look, he's shorter than everybody else too. He looks like a very, very young guy.
He was a youngster.
Man.
He was probably the youngest one on the ship.
No wonder he's hiding. He looks like he's 12. Of course, he's older than that. But
who
he sure
knows?
looks like
Maybe
he's 12.
he was even younger than I'm saying when I say he. But the thing is, I found a Guffey, some pages from a Guffey register.
Okay.
And that from where he went to grade school, and it lists the kids who were there and their birth dates, and that it has my daddy's name on there with the birth date being December the 29th, 1899. So that's another proof that he just lied about his age.
What's in this envelope?
Pictures. And
okay.
A yearbook. A yearbook from when my mother and daddy were in high school. And there are other pictures, and I have crammed some of them in here. Oh, now this is the thing. Now this one has a mother with her original spelling, Linnie. These pictures were made in 1908, and it says Chautauqua. And we had a Chautauqua in my town, and I'm not sure what a Chautauqua.
Oh, I think I know. I'm gonna have
a
to
group
look.
that gets together and talks about things.
Yeah, because it says Owensboro. Is that what that is? Owensboro?
Yeah,
Is that the word?
Owensboro was really the larger town closer to Calhoun. Owensboro is right on the Ohio River.
Yeah, I'll look up Chautauqua. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't know if I'm ever going to get any of this stuff out of here. Or this may be somewhere. I've got a picture of a huckster wagon. Now this, some of this is, now this is a picture of my mother's family. There's her father, and here's her daddy. He was Rufus G. Osborne. He was a veterinarian and a carpenter and a tobacco farmer. And there he is, and there's my grandmother. And then here are my mother's sister, her oldest sister, her next oldest sister, the one that's next to her, and then there's my mother, the little towhead sitting on his knee.
So was she the baby?
She was the baby. And I have a feeling she was probably the favorite. The babies are sometimes.
All right. Well, I think I will stop the recording, and we will continue looking at the pictures off of the recorder.